web browser. So that means irrespective of its operating system, you can run such a program. Now that we are all on the same level, I'd like for you to just imagine that now you are able to use machine learning algorithms to improve your engineering practices at work, or even improve your own research activities without writing a single line of code. Just imagine how beneficial that would be. That is what this research seeks to do, and is looking at using that for lithology prediction while drilling. It's important to do this because whilst drilling, lithology determination actually relies on the mud circulation. But then this sometimes delays, especially when you go into deeper depth. Looking at the fact that lithology determination during mud circulation is important in determining the type of rocks within our reservoir, also important in guiding the driller in avoiding pipe staking and other potential problems during drilling, and also important in actually verifying the well logs. It's no wonder that majority of the research that is being done now is looking at optimizing this process. So some research that have been done in this area have looked at using well logs as well as mud logs with machine learning algorithms in order to optimize the determination of lithology. But then the challenge is that all these works, if you're a typical engineer or a researcher, you definitely have to learn how to code in R, Python, or even MATLAB. And even if you know how to code, it becomes a tedious process because you have to dedicate a lot of man hours to be able to get the whole thing done. And even at the end of all of this, what you are doing, you don't get to see exactly what you are doing until you are done, which creates a lot of bugs. So there is no user interface. And this runs through all of the research that I've gone through so far. So this is the motivation that I wanted to overcome so that it can be easier for every engineer to be able to apply and optimize their processes. So the main objective was actually to build a web application that can actually be used to optimize lithology prediction. In order to get this done, several objectives were also made. One of them was to build the workflow, the skeletal structure. Then after that, compile the different machine learning algorithms so that we can be able to actually see the best ones that can be used for this work. Then the last one was to actually get the flesh on this skeletal structure, which is the user interface. So at the end of this, the workflow that we used was, first of all, do the research. It was divided into different phases, 3 actually. First of all, do your research, which took about 2 months to get done. The next one was to write the code, review it, and then identify the algorithms that can be used, which took about 3 months to actually get done. And then the last one was to create the user interface, which took about 2 months. So I spent about roughly 7 months to get this work done, which was quite hectic. Then the next thing was to actually verify the work that I had done with real-life data. And hopefully I was able to get data from the Volve oil field, which was a steady area that I had. The data included 10 wells, had 6 different lithological classes. So at the end of all of this, I would like to show you some of the results that I had. One of them was a skeletal structure. This picture shows a section of the codes that was written. Indeed, you will not be able to see this when you are running the application because all of this will run at the background. The next one that we did was regards to the selection of the algorithms. We decided to investigate 9 different algorithms and arrange them based on their accuracy. We selected 3 of the best algorithms, which included the random forest decision tree and then the gradient boosting. These 3, in order to QC them, went ahead to do a cross-validation in order to QC these ones. And so these ones were still able to predict the different lithologies, especially with the sandstone, since that was where the reservoir was. And so having all of this, the data can be seen further within this table. And it shows that, especially with the random forest, it was able to predict as high as 99.6% of the data set. This shows that, indeed, with this application, we did not just input any machine learning algorithm, tried and tested the ones that will actually work with lithology prediction. So now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to actually show you the interface of the adaptive lithology predictor, which I call ALIP. When you open this up, it first gives you a section where you can upload your data set. Then you'll be able to navigate through. Okay, you'll be able to navigate through your data set as well, while you'll be able to look at the different sections of the data set, which will be showed in a demo very soon. Then you'll also be able to select your own features that you want to be able to do your prediction. Then finally, you select exactly what you want to predict. Indeed, this app will also help you to select the features. You see that in the demo. Then at the end of it all of this will be displayed on an interactive screen, which welcomes you to the ALIP predictor. So, judges, distinguished, okay, so judges, distinguished professionals over here, students, I'd like to welcome you to the adaptive lithology predictor. There's a short demo that shows actually how the app works. So first of all, like I said, you import your lithologies. Then afterwards, you go on to look at actually how the lithology, with just the click of a button, all of this shows. This shows your data description, its statistics as well, which shows exactly how the data set looks like. Then you're able to view your null values. You can view them in the table. You can also plot them individually. Whilst you plot them as well, it shows within just a few seconds actually, you'll be able to see your null values plot. You can interact with it. Different colors. You can just choose the color and within a few seconds, you get all of this. This will actually take you months to be able to do all of this with coding. Then the next thing will be to be able to drop your null values. And with a click of a button, you're able to do all of that. Then the last one is to select your features. We have Pearson's rank correlation as well as the mutual information score, which will tell you how the relation between your features and your target variable looks like. So all of this will help you to select this. For this demo, we decided to actually use all 16 features just to check the extent at which this app will work. So when you see all of these 16 features have been used over here, you can go to the home screen. Then you can also display your target data set just to look at how the distribution looks like. And all of this works with just a click of a button, actually. Then at the end of the day, you want to classify. So you choose your classification algorithm. And then within minutes, it gives you your predictions, your metrics. Then it also has to plot to QC it. You have to see what you've predicted against the actual data set. So it will also tell you that to optimize this one, you can use the hyperparameters, increase it with just inputting the values in there. And then within a minute, this actually takes a minute, within a minute, you are able to get your results. It will increase, as you see within the random forest results. You see that around 0.5, it will change to 0.9, increasing which means that the model is actually training it very well. You get your confusion matrix. It will tell you which features was actually beneficial in this actually model that you were able to do. Then finally, it will plot your predicted against your actual plot. And this is how it looks like, showing that at the end of the day, you are able to actually do this work. The interesting thing is, at the end of the day, you can save all that you've done so that next time when you want to use this to predict lithology, you don't have to go through all of this. You just input your features, and with a click of a button, you can get it done for you. So right now, I can confidently tell you that with what has been accomplished, we can say that when it comes to lithology prediction, we can get an app that does not require any coding, and it can increase the amount, the way of predicting the lithology by more than 80%. This can also enhance the optimization, the reservoir characterization, because this time around, you are not taking samples at different intervals. You are taking samples data as you're drilling. Then at the end of the day, You get it in real time because this time around you're getting your decisions done in real time. You're getting your data in real time. And then the fascinating part of it all is that you don't have to write a single line of code. At the end of the day, I can confidently let you all know that Alep has been created. What are the bits from Alep? From here, we have a back end that has been created. We have the recommended machine learning models that have also been done. And then finally, we have a user-friendly interface. So now you don't have to stress about coding 500 to 1,000 lines of codes. You can do all of this within minutes with just a click of a button. Going forward, I'd like to improve upon the performance of Alep. Right now, the data set used was a near vertical wall. I'd like to use horizontal walls as well as different types of walls. Include a user interface with a frequently asked questions section. Also include some security features. Right now, it relies on the local devices security features. Include some as well. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank SP International, Africa, and Ghana for this wonderful opportunity to be able to present what I've done to all of you seated here. My university, the University of Mines and Technology, for their wonderful work in training me this far. Also, my manager and my segment members and the workers at SLB for their support, and Equinor for providing a data set. I'd like to also thank all of you for sitting through this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, for that wonderful presentation. I believe that club was awarded for that purpose. Now let's get to business. Are you telling us that you are the first to develop this predictive measure for, for lithology prediction? Are you the first in this whole world to predict, to develop such an app?
Thank you very much.
That's my first question. I'll do a follow-up.
Okay. So should I go ahead to answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Indeed, when I was starting this work, I actually did some research on it to see if I'll be able to find people who have done this. Others have done something similar to this, but then they don't go so far as to completing it. Some have done just doing the interface, visualizing your well logs. They stop over there, and it's on GitHub. Others have done just inputting the well logs. And so complete work like this, I've not seen something like that.
So a company called AllML has developed such an app which is working very well in the US, predicting 88%.
Okay.
I don't know if you met that company, but obviously they're not in Ghana. So I would say probably in Ghana you're the first. But in the whole world, there is another company doing it. So you answer the question that will follow up by telling us that you've only tested it with a vertical wall. So you're going to do it with a horizontal.
Yes,
that's another step that you need to take it to make it confirmed that any kind of wall can be used to predict lithology, right?
Yeah.
And the last thing I would say is, have you tested it with another, kind of block? Why you are in Ghana, you could not use any Ghana data. You're working with Schlumberger. Schlumberger has data more than any other service company. I believe you should be testing with Jubilee and 10 fields here as well.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'll do that after this one.
My question, nice presentation by the way.
Thank you.
My question is similar to what Vivas just asked. So before the advent of coding and all that, how were people predicting lithology?
Okay, thank you for your question. What I've been able to find out so far is that in order to determine lithology while drilling, there is an LWD2 attached to the well, which can be used to determine the lithology, as well as so this LWD2 has a gamma ray indicator on it, which can determine between shale and then sand as well. Then also, the normal way is to wait for the mud cartons to come to the surface so that the mud logger, after it has been sampled, can be able to determine the different lithologies in there. So the challenge I came across with this is that the LWD2 is not closer to the bit, so there is a lag time. Also, the mud logger going to the surface, when it increases in depth, it takes a while for the cartons to come to the surface. And when they are sampling too, they have a sample depth. When the drilling rate increases, the sample depth has to also increase, which means that some of the samples will also not be collected. And so these are the challenges that I saw. I was actually worried that I was actually willing to see something like that, because when imagining this work in my head, I actually thought I would not be able to do it because, well, I've not seen. So to answer your question, this is how I've seen that is being done. Okay. And so I sought to actually cover that area and to be able to at least contribute to research and to science as well.
Okay, thank you for that. So how exactly, that leads me to my next question. How exactly do you intend to get your own data to feed into this program? Okay. What modifications are you now going to make to the tool, to the drilling tool, to get your data?
Thank you very much. So what I know is that when they get the LWD2, they usually have the MWD or LWD2 records data as the drilling process is going on. So this data usually comes up in the form of CSV or LAS files. And these data are being fed into several softwares that they are being used right now in the offshore activity. So the idea is to be able to integrate this into so that they can also pick up the data points that they are using right now. So sometimes the CSV and then the LAS files as well.
And so you expect that you will get the data faster, feed it into the software, interpret it before the normal process is being done, which is the logger analyzing the sample and all that.
So I did some research on that, and then I found out that so an experimental work was done, and they saw that with an ideal case scenario, looking at a drilling fluid, maybe water, an ideal case scenario, it can take, with an annular velocity of around 100 feet per minute, drilling at a depth with a shallow depth, which is 100,000 feet. Drilling at such a feet, it will take around 3 hours, a minimum of 3 hours for the cartons to come to the surface. And so I was looking at it this way, that if it will take around 3 hours for the cartons to come to the surface, maybe we can optimize it so that even if this thing keeps long and it even takes 30 minutes to get there, we'll at least get our information faster and with more accuracy.
So you are going to save 2.5 hours?
Pardon?
You are going to save 2.5 hours?
That's what I've been able to get so far.
Okay.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Practically, how is you getting your data on time, faster, going to affect decision making with getting it with your LWD later? Do you get where I'm coming from? There's a lag with LWD, but it's still going to give you the data. Your app is going to give you real-time data. Is there a decision that has to be taken immediately on the rig? That's why we need it earlier, or we can still rely on the lag time data or understanding of how the lithology of the reservoir is.
Okay.
So let's understand the importance of your app.
Okay, thank you very much. Indeed, I asked myself a similar question when I was actually doing this research, and I came across something that when they are drilling, there is a section where ROP can suddenly increase, and there's another section where ROP can suddenly reduce. In such situations, drillers usually do not want to pull out of hole Because imagine you've drilled so long depth, you want to pull out of hole. That means you have to wait and drill, and the time for that you've got the rig will also, that means more money. You have to invest more money. So when I saw that, I was thinking that indeed the LWD2 can give you all of this. But imagine if ROP are suddenly increased, they are suddenly reduced. Do you wait on the LWD2 to be pulled out of hole before you can get all of this? So that's where the whole idea was coming from.
I really wish this problem statement had been stated whilst presenting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you too, Doc.
Thank you. I think there was many more questions that they would have liked to ask, but unfortunately your time's up. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Well done. Brilliant. Excellent. So next on the agenda today is, if I could ask Desmond to come up. So this is Desmond Ashikwe from University of Mines and Technology. If we can get Desmond's presentation up, does that look right to you? Yeah?
Yes.
That's it.
Good afternoon, all protocols observed. I believe we've heard this sentiment or emotional cry where people are saying that Ghana is producing crude oil and it's not getting as much as it's supposed to get. The IOCs are cheating us. You've been hearing these sentiments. So if you want answers to it, then follow this presentation so that as an SPE member, when they are saying this, you can educate them on that. Whether truly Ghana is being cheated or Ghana is getting the maximum benefit that it's supposed to get. So my name is Desmond Ashikwe from the University of Mines and Technology. And I'm presenting on the topic proposing a progressive upstream fiscal regime to expand value creation for Ghana's petroleum resource development. Case study of Ghana's Jubilee Field. All right, so my presentation runs through introduction down to acknowledgement. Now, the Gulf of Guinea is an attractive place for oil and gas investment, of which Ghana is no exception. Now, the Jubilee Field is found in the Gulf of Guinea Tunnel Basin and is estimated to have a recoverable reserves of 618 million barrels. So this is a pictorial view of Ghana's oil fields. First, we have 3 offshore basins, the Accra-Kita Basin, the South Pond, then we have the Tunnel Basin. And we have 3 oil-producing fields, all found in the Tunnel Basin, of which Jubilee is part. So now, fiscal regime, they define the extent to which a host government and a prospective investor can apportion risk and project rewards. Now, fiscal regime is categorized into 2 main groups. We have the concessionary, also known as the royalty and tax. Then we have the contractor, also known as production sharing contract. All right. So if we are saying that Ghana is being cheated, you cannot get as much as you can from a petroleum project if your fiscal regime does not give you that license. So Ghana's fiscal regime is a unique one on its own. It's an hybrid. It has a mixture of both concessionary and contractor. So these are the elements that make up the Ghana's fiscal regime. We have a royalty of 5%, income tax of 35%. We have participation and carried interest, then additional oil entitlement, which is tied to the ROR. Problem statement. So, a fiscal regime that gives more benefit, 100% benefit to the host government will not receive maximum investment. Likewise, a fiscal regime that is overly generous, giving more to the host government, will limit the benefit, giving more to the investor will limit the benefit of the host government. So what should a fiscal regime be? It should be balanced. Now it should have a win-win situation, also known as Pareto optimality. Now, is Ghana being cheated or not? We have this. So in 2014, Aka and Kankam did the work on the fiscal regime of Ghana, the current fiscal regime of Ghana. And they concluded that the 5% fixed royalty that is charged on the Jubilee field is so low. It's lower than other oil, Gulf of Guinea oil producing countries. And it's even lower than the average that is charged in the world, which is 7%. Then in 2014, Jebrewuzi also did a research on the current fiscal regime of Ghana. And he says our fiscal regime is so generous to the investor and does not even capture a windfall profit. So with this, we can say that, yes, Ghana is not receiving the maximum benefit that it's supposed to get. Now you can see this man, Konimo, who is sitting on an empty barrel. He's just here trying to let us understand that if we don't get the maximum benefit that we can get from our petroleum revenues, there is something that is waiting for us in the Ghana called resource scarce or paradox of plenty. Then we have this boy here that is crying. What he's telling us that he's crying about his future, that we should practice what we call economics of exhaustible resources, which says get as much as you can get from a petroleum project, because a barrel of crude that is produced today is not guaranteed tomorrow. So I did a lot of literature reviews, but the ones that are very important to my work is one that Inousi Inali et al. Did in 2018. And they look at the analysis of government and contractor take statistics in the proposed petroleum industry fiscal bill. And in their work, what was important to mine was they used what we call deterministic and stochastic cash flow model. And they inculcated what we call a sliding scale royalty, which is tied to the terrain of production and production rate of both oil and gas fields. But their work lacked what we call sensitivity analysis, which is very important to investors because they want to see how sensitive the project is before they can invest their dollar. Also, Ferro Inter 2017 also look at the petroleum fiscal regime of Uruguay. And in their work, they used what we call discounted cash flow model. And they inculcated what we call a R factor, which is a profitability indicator that is used to evaluate fiscal regime. But their work also lacked what we call risk and uncertainty analysis, which is, we could have given a good understanding to the petroleum fiscal regime of Uruguay. These are other research that helped my work. Now, so what are my research objectives? One is to review and evaluate the current fiscal regime's performance with other 6 producing countries and the impact of fixed royalty on the government take. Then also propose a progressive fiscal regime with sliding scale royalty and its effect on the government take to expand value creation. Then lastly, quantify the extent of risk and uncertainty inherent in the petroleum business in Ghana. All right, so to achieve this objective, one, I used a method called a cash flow. Now, what is cash flow? Cash flow is just inflows and outflows of cash in a petroleum project. Now, this method is widely used in the oil and gas industry in order to evaluate risk and uncertainty. So I use the cash flow model to evaluate the fiscal regime of Ghana by building a cash flow model for it. Then after, I built the same model for 6 African countries. Then I proposed, using the same cash flow model, to propose a progressive fiscal regime. Now, I didn't use the fixed royalty. I used a sliding scale royalty so that it can address the issue of the current fiscal regime not capturing windfall profit. But cash flow model has its own limitation. It's not able to quantify risk and uncertainty. And it's very important to investors because before you invest, you want to see the risk and uncertainty in the project. So in order to address that, we will use what we call the Monte Carlo simulation. So these some of the models I built. So these the economic model for the fixed regime of Ghana. Then this the one for Nigeria. and the proposed one that is tied to is tied to the R factor. Now, what is R factor? R factor is the ratio of the revenue divided by the cost of a project. Now, R factor is used to evaluate fiscal regime. What it does is it's able to capture windfall profit. So when the R factor, when your revenue increases, it will automatically increase the R factor, which will increase the royalty attached to it. Now, when it decreases, it will do the same. In that, you don't call it a loss. You are incentivizing the investor that you are sharing the risk that is going through. So with my result, the current fiscal regime of Ghana was able to generate an MPV of 2.86 billion at internal rate of return of 14. Now, the one built for Nigeria was able to generate NPV of $5.26 billion at internal rate of return of 5%. Now, someone may be wondering, why is Nigerians' fiscal regime generating more than that of Ghana? Because they have an element that is not found in that of Ghana. One, they have a royalty of 8% as compared to Ghana's 5%. Then they have an income tax of 65.8 as compared to Ghana's 35. Then also they have what we call signature and production bonuses, in which Ghana we don't have. So this is what is making them have as more as even twice that of Ghana. Now, ranking the fiscal regimes, we have Nigeria and Cameroon occupying first and second in terms of the MPV for the government take. Then we have that one for Ghana, the current fiscal regime that is used in Ghana. It generated 2.86 billion, and it occupied seat position comparing all the other countries. Then now this is the proposed one, which doesn't have a fixed royalty, but it has a sliding scale royalty tied towards the R factor. With that one, it generated a revenue of $3.33 billion for the host government, and it occupying the fifth position. So in order to expand value creation for the host government, the proposed fiscal regime, which is tied to the R factor, has increased the revenue base from 2.8 billion to 3.3 billion. That is, more value has been created for the host government, and is occupying the fifth position. Now, we have another one that is designed, but that one is tied to the annual production of Jubilee. It's also there to address what we call a windfall profit. So in case the production hikes, it's going to increase the royalty base for the host government. When production goes down, it's going to reduce, and it will be a sharing of risk with the host government. With that one, it generated a revenue of $3.33 billion as compared to the fixed royalty, which generated 2.8 billion. Yes, it maintained the same seat position, but more revenue was generated for the host government. Now, comparing the current fiscal regime and that of Ghana, and that of the proposed one, the R factor royalty scheme and the production royalty scheme. Now, in terms of internal rate of return, the current fiscal regime generated 14% as compared to the R factor, which generated 12%, and that of the royalty, the production royalty scheme, which generated 14%. Now, what is internal rate of return? Internal rate of return just defines the worth of every dollar that is invested in a project. So, how do you evaluate a project using the internal rate of return? The internal rate of return should be greater than the assumed discount rate. And in building the model, the assumption for the discount rate was 10%, and the oil price was capped at $75 per barrel. And I assume that there's only one oil producing company in the Jubilee field in order to do away with complications of CAPEX and OPEX. Now, in terms of the NPV for the host government take, the current fiscal regime generated $2.86 billion as compared to the R factor royalty scheme, which generated $3.3 billion, and that one for the production royalty scheme, which generated $3.00 billion. Then with the undiscounted government take, the current fiscal regime generated 52.8% as compared to the R factor, which generated 61.45, and that of the production royalty scheme, which generated 55.41. Now, to quantify risk and uncertainty, we look at the stochastic result for the R internal rate of return. Now, the 5% here just depicts that there is 5% chance that the internal rate of return will be less than 12.5, and there is 90%. The color here shows that there is 90% certainty that the internal rate of return will be between 12.45 and 15.5. Then the 5% here just tells the investor that there is 5% chance that the internal rate of return is going to be greater than 10.08. Now we have what we call sensitivity analysis. Now, sensitivity analysis, it talks about how sensitive the input variables are towards the internal rate of return. So with the sensitivity analysis, we have oil price. It increased the internal rate of return by 93%, which shows that as the oil price increase is going to increase the internal rate of return, which is a good news for the investor. Sorry. Now, to conclude, the current fiscal regime is ranked safe as compared to other African countries, and it has internal rate of return of 2.8 billion. Now, the government take increased from 52.8% to 55.1% using the proposed sliding scale royalty tied to annual production, and it maintained a rank of safe. Now we have the internal rate, the NPV of the host government increased from 2.86 billion to 3.3 billion using the R factor royalty, and it jumped to the 5th position. Now, risk and uncertainty of Ghana's petroleum sector using Monte Carlo simulation was quantified successfully. Now, recommendation: the fixed royalty scheme used in the Jubilee field can be changed to sliding scale royalty for more value to be created. Now, we can further increase the income tax from 35%. If we want more value to be created for the host government. So, contribution to knowledge. Sliding scale royalty tied to R factor is more progressive than the royalty in terms of revenue mobilization, and also risk and uncertainty using the Monte Carlo simulation has been quantified in the oil and gas sector of Ghana. Now, these are my references. And I want to acknowledge my supervisor, Professor Mowumi Lidari, who helped me through all these economic models. So now we can see that value has been created for the host government. Thank you.
Thanks, Desmond, for the presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question, and it might lead to some other questions depending on my understanding. Okay, so for this Jubilee field, how is cash call being made in your model? How do you make cash calls?
So one is the royalty. A royalty of 5% is the first cash cap. Then we have the income tax of 35%.
Okay, let me explain what I mean by cash call. And I thought it's a universal term, right? Okay, so when you want to, if you have a project in Jubilee field at any point in time, who pays for the cash? How do you get the money?
So it's the investor.
Pays 100%.
Yes, he pays for. So we have a participating and carrying interest of 10%. Now with exploration, and you are doing your exploration, everything, development, it is the investor that pays for it. But now when production is made, the GNPC, who represent the government, has an interest of 10%. But with payment of cash, it is the investor that pays. After his production has started, he will start paying for royalty of 5% and income tax of 35%.
But at first, they pay everything. All
yes.
capex.
Yes.
And all the OPEX.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, if I should engage you on this, we're going to engage for the next 1 hour. This is my faculty. Based on the question he asked, which is very critical, and for information, we're not operating on a 10% anymore. It's 13.37 because there's a carried interest, like you said, and there's a participating interest, right? That makes it a hybrid.
Yes.
And because of this, the R factor you're talking about can never work. R factor works with concessional regime only. Okay. Immediately talk about participating interest. R factor doesn't come into the equation at all. It's a good presentation, powerful one. Let the message be, we could have looked at concessionary, which R factor would have been the best way to receive money. Because petroleum fiscal terms are standing on 2 legs, receivables and the management of the money, right? So we're talking about the receiving part. Then you mentioned progressive upstream fiscal regime, as if you can go back to Talo and say, let's change something. You can't change anything. Once it's signed, it's signed. So this one you are bringing, we can't go back to the PA and say we need to make an adjustment.
That's why I was proposing.
Yes, so since you are proposing, don't make it look like we can change it. We cannot change it.
Yes.
Because we have signed a hybrid of PSC and concessionary. The message is a bit tweaked. All right? Now, I wish you could have modeled the actual regime now and what you're proposing. But I didn't see any comparative analysis. You were standing there talking about sensitivity. But I didn't see that sensitivity. Apart from that risk model that you just did, that Monte Carlo thing that you did. You could have done the BAU, what we are practicing today, against what you're proposing.
All right.
And as soon as you also introduce R factor, that income tax of 35% doesn't work. Because R factor will tell you which income tax to apply. Am I lying?
Yes.
So now that 35%, what?
So that one was the current fiscal regime.
Slide 17. Yeah, I understand. So there's a current fiscal regime, and I saw another one with
that is
R factor
proposed.
proposed.
Yes.
But you also brought that 35%.
All right.
So I expected to see your R factor giving you a proposed tax to be used. Because once you bring R factor, you don't even go to PSA. You don't even share anything again.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So next time, those details should be very, 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 very clear. Then you said you're going to do for Nigeria and other countries. I didn't see it.
No, so I built the model using Nigeria's fiscal regime, imposed it on the Jubilee field. So use the production.
Do you know how far Nigeria is in the oil and gas industry?
Yeah. So that's why I made some assumptions that we are now looking at the production profile of Jubilee field. Then we are assuming that the social culture, the level of economic development is the same. If not, then I cannot impose the fiscal regime of Nigeria in Ghana. So because I wanted to show a clarity of our current fiscal regime, that's why I used their fiscal regime and model it using the production profile of Jubilee field.
All right. When you pick the PA, if you pick any PA in Nigeria, it can never be compared to any PA even in Ghana. Even in Ghana here, no PA is the same.
Yes.
So when you're comparing things, you should make sure that the field you are using has the same characteristics of the field that we are comparing with in Nigeria. So you can't pick an onshore field and compare here because the royalty determined on that onshore field is different from that of offshore field. All those simple sensitivity that you yourself you mentioned needs to be taken care of. Now, Nigeria is using 65% income tax. Ghana, you can never go beyond what you are doing today. they risk the industry.
Yes.
You understand? So they can even practice concessionary freely. Ghana, nobody will buy into that idea.
I'm looking at Nigeria, in the 2 decades now, they've changed their fiscal regime. From 2000, then in 2005, they went to the PSE, and now they are using the P, yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our final presentation of the competition. If I can welcome Roland Victor Agbogo, yeah, from University of Ghana. Agbogo. Agbogo. Yeah. And here's your, so it's that one to move forward, that one to back.
Good afternoon. My name is Roland Victor Agbobo, and I'm in the University of Ghana, and I'm presenting on this topic, reservoir characterization and quality analysis of the hydrocarbon formation in the K-field offshore tunnel basin of Ghana. All right, so I'm going to run to you the introduction to the references, and you are going to see what I'm going to talk about here. And my work is basically about characterizing the reservoir in the sense that from the past times, the geologists and the petrophysicists go about it by using flow, that is dynamic flow units, and also, that is quality index of a reservoir to be able to determine the quality of a reservoir for production. Also, the petroleum engineers also go about it by using their, pressure profile, and also that of, pressure profile and the, productivity index. So what it means is that with this work, the basic impact of this work is such that when you know your saturation exponent, it informs you about your saturation. So here, my water saturation, my voltage, that is my voltage, my resistance, my true resistivity, and the resistivity index for the various saturations. So the saturations represent the number of the sample times, the sample, core sample that I dealt with. So here at my 100 saturation, I'm having a resistivity index of 1. And 2 to 49, I had my resistivity index, my resistivity index of 4.534. So here I need to plot a graph of the resistivity index against the water saturation to be able to determine my saturation exponent, to be able to compute and use it to find my porosity, such that where Y and where Z has their own porosity generated from the graph. So here I computed it by finding the log of my water saturation and the log of resistivity index, and then running the computation, and I had this, such that I could be able to plot it on my linear graph to be able to deduce my saturation exponent by converting my Archie's equation to a line equation and find the slope, which is the n, which is 2.1. All right. So this is it, the graph. So this is how I got it on the linear graph, and then I was able to deduce my saturation exponent from it. So here, I'm done with my computation to get my water saturation exponent for the well X. Here, I go for it to find my porosity by finding my formation resistivity index by giving the formula as FR is equal to what? My resistivity, by the 12.09, which is my productivity index, over the 0.5, and I had my, formation resistivity to be 22. So with this, I went ahead to employ the humble equation where the formation resistivity will be needed to calculate, and this is it. The formation resistivity is equal to 0.62 over porosity with the power 2.15, and I computed and I had my porosity. So in turn, I've been able to manually found my porosity and my water saturation exponent for well X. But then, he go about by, when I want to, get my pore size distribution in turn to determine the type of, grains of rocks I'm dealing with here, I would have to evaluate the, pore through size and radius distribution of my data point for well X in order to be able to determine my, pore through or the grain size I'm dealing with, such that of well Y and Z had pore geometry and then pore structure correlation to be able to deduct it easily from it. So here, this is my results and then discussion. So for here, I was able to, but then before then, I have to work out my formation resistivity index and relate it to water saturation, such that I'll be able to get my, water saturation for that of well Z. That is another computation to be able to get my water saturation. So with my evaluation of porosity probability for well Y, it was indicated that when I plotted the graph of probability against the porosity, the data point showed significance in similarities, which is to say that there were enough pore spaces with relative, permeability, such that permeability and porosity is not really, or directly or indirectly, quantitative. But then you can see some correlation between them, such that the data points are clustering quite closer. But it also tells us by our coefficient of correlation, which is the R square is equal to the 0.2674, telling us that the kind of rocks that we are dealing here is not solely a clean reservoir, in that there's a little bit heterogeneities in it. So here, I also found that of the well Z to mean that the porosity values in there were such closer, which showed similarities in the data set, such that porosity and permeability was a little bit correlated. So my table shows my results for my porosity and permeability, and that of the well X I had 19, and that of the well Y I had 3.5 to 20.6 as a range for the whole data set, and well Z as 8.7 to 23.7 as a whole range, where my permeability was indicated from the graph as 0.151 to 10,292 for well Y, and that of 14.7 to 697.4 for well Z. And this tells me that my reservoir indeed is good for commercial accumulation of hydrocarbon to be able to go about my reserve education or my reserve evaluation here. So here, I also went ahead to find my grain size distribution in my well Y and Z by using the pore geometry against the pore structure graph. And I correlated this, and I realized that the data sets were clustered on my trend of my line, which tells me that my grain size increases from fine grains to coarser grains as it trends from, the areas around 10 to the areas around the higher figures as we see there. All right? So what it means is that the data set showing the clustering here also shows that there is connectivity in the pore throat, which in turn allows the permeation of what fluid to walk through it to make sure that at least we have a good reservoir, such that if the reservoir is not having a good permeability, we are going to have problem with our production. So here also indicates my pore geometry, pore structure for my well Z. So for my same correlation, I was able to deduce from it, telling that there is a relationship in the pore structure and the pore geometry, such that the grain size of the rock depicts that it transcends from lower or finer grains to a coarser grain, such that there is a connectivity in the pore throat, which in turn shows that the permeability is well correlated, or it is very interconnected. So here, for my table for the, 2 minutes, okay. So here, with my table for the comparison of the pore throat analysis to determine my grain size for my well Y and Z, this was the parameter that I had, which in turn is the correlation coefficient to tell me how close my rock is to 1, to tell me the kind of rock I'm dealing with, which is sandstone. So here I was able to find the saturation exponent for well Z, which is to say that my well Z, the correlation for it, when I did composite correlation for the whole data set for the well Z, I had my saturation exponent to be 1.90 for the mean of all these data sets. So I use this to also found my the pore throat analysis, or the type of pores I'm dealing with for my well X, because I didn't have a data set that directly tells me that. So I have to use the pore throat history diagram by correlating the pore throat radius of my well, and then I had the data set falling in the scale of macros. Okay, macro category, which is determined that my pore geometry is smaller and my grains are smaller. So I'm dealing with a smaller geometry. So in turn, this is my conclusion. I see to conclude that petrophysical parameter for porosity, permeability, water saturation, and that of reservoir pore throat distribution should be considered as a very important factor to be able to analyze and characterize your reservoir, to be able to ensure and to understand that your reservoir is either a water-wet system that in turn could allow hydrocarbon, which is oil, to form a film on its surface to allow that oil to be produced, which is movable through the pore structures of the rock. And however, I also tend to tell that the zones through which the, wells were, drilled show that the reservoirs were very productive. And hence, I also suggest that, and also tell that there was a high capillary potential of trapping hydrocarbon by the reason of the pore throat structure that we experience in there, which is a very tiny or a very small pore throat, which in turn helps in capillary trapping of hydrocarbon than that of the macro and that of the macro, which is a larger pores. And here, I also see to identify that to understand and to make a commercial, reserve estimation, this information that I had from my 3 wells tells that my well is indeed supporting commercial accumulation of my hydrocarbon necessary for exploitation. And here I see to have a recommendation that well logs should be added to my core data to be able to understand the characterization of these wells. And as well, there should be a detailed study on the relationship of the water saturation with relative to capillary pressure to tell if indeed it could be produced entirely without having residual oil reserved in it. And here, my thing that I encountered. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Roland. I have some questions, but I will limit it to 2. Can you go back to the title of your paper, please?
Sorry?
The title, the first slide.
Yeah.
Reservoir characterization and quality analysis of this basin. Okay. So what exactly, in just few words, did you do differently from the knowledge that is out there in this field?
What I did practically is to bring the knowledge of water saturation exponent to tell the engineers and the scientists that it is a determining factor to tell that for you to know your oil saturation of your zone of production or of your reservoir, you have to have a prerequisite knowledge of this to be able to tell that indeed your oil saturated in your reservoir can be produced, such that most engineers and the scientists or the economists of the projects that are ongoing do not really take consideration of this little parameter. But then they go ahead only relying on resistivity of the hydrocarbon or the water in there.
Okay, that's
to
the
determine.
end value, right?
Pardon?
What you are saying is that they don't take cognizance of the end value in Archie's equation. Is that what you are saying?
They don't take emphasis on the saturation exponent itself. They see it as only a value to express effect on the resistivity alone. But however, they do not see it as a value that have concrete information to tell that indeed this tells that we have good water wet system, which is to say that of a rock, which says that if your rock is water wet, that means that any fluid that is immiscible in it, any other fluid which is oil in it, will not imbibe to the grains of the pot, making it oil wet to be able to not produce it. So thereby we need to invite enhanced oil recovery to be able to break that surface tension and to change the imbibitions form, or to change the waterability system of it.
Okay, fine. And this is just the second one is a fundamental question, right?
Right.
You have cores that you used in well X only. There was no core from Y and Z.
There were cores for Y and that of X and Z, but then there were the data set given to me was cores with parameters, by which it wasn't a full data set for me to correlate on a graph easily.
Okay.
So I had to calculate these parameters.
But it was only well X that had core data.
It had core data.
Okay. How big is your core by show of your hands? How big are these core?
Okay.
How big do you think these cores are?
All right. The core sizes, I think old. Not be too. Yeah, something like that. But
from the floor or
no,
what?
from
this. Okay.
yes, from this end
Okay.
to this extent.
Okay.
Not too long.
How,
Exactly.
Yeah. How big is this oil reservoir?
The oil reservoir is actually very big, and this call will not be
give
very
me a
representative
distance
of it.
from where you are, so that people in the room can
Exactly.
have an idea of what we are doing here.
All right.
From here, where you are, how big would the reservoir be?
The reservoir could be as big than the whole. Space of this. Hall extending to even outside of the hall, because it's a lateral extension.
So
It can be very large and extensive.
That reservoir might be as, let me tell you, it can be as from here to the gate.
I'm telling you.
And you are trying to show me from that small core
Exactly.
what the saturation of this entire reservoir will be without incorporating logs from just, and you are looking at just one well. How accurate do you think that will be?
Exactly. So I made a limitation by which I wasn't able to read out, by which I'm going to say here is that the limitation that I experience is that I understand critically that core sample do not necessarily represent the entirety of the reservoir, but then it tells a story as to sections of where we drilled and how that zone is good in terms of the quality of the reservoir, in terms of the hydraulics and its production, the flow behavior. However, with this, I understand that when we want to do a good job, the better thing for me to do was to get a log data to tie it up to understand how it's behaving as it goes downwards in the depth of the borehole. But then, this was the only information, data that I was exposed to.
Because by the time you incorporate log, which is further, and you incorporate a build-up test from your well cleanup and all that, you have more than enough to determine the saturation of your reservoir, and not just a tiny core that is very different. But all the same, very good job. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all our contestants and to our judges as well. And that brings us to the end of the student paper contest for 2023, Feather Region. And so the judges are now going to deliberate. I don't know, Riverson, what's next on the agenda? Lunch. Okay, I'll hand over to you, and you can fill everybody in.
Awesome. Can we give our judges a round of applause? So if you have your bulletin, we would go for lunch. And then after lunch, we'll come back for the Petro Bowl competition, the group stage. And then we have the finals. Okay, I have a very quick announcement. Please, faculty advisors and those coordinating the Petro Bowl competition, please, you're advised to please come to the front for a short meeting, please. Faculty advisors and all those that will be involved in the Petro Bowl competition, please come in front. You have a few minutes meeting. So now we'll go for lunch, and then please, you are expected to convene here immediately after lunch so that we can have the Petro Bowl. On the bulletin, we're supposed to have remarks by sponsors. Is there any sponsor in the building? All our beautiful sponsors: Ghana Gas, Modec, Vital, Wayo Engineering and Construction, Sonagol, Gektric, Integrity, Kenyon, African Center for Energy Policy, and of course the Ministry of Mines and Energy in Uganda. Is there any of these sponsors here that would like to speak? If there is none, thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you.
Yeah, so quick announcement, okay? Tomorrow, there's so many activities tomorrow. Right after the panel discussion tomorrow, we're going to have the career fair. This announcement will be tomorrow again, but I just want to prompt you so you come prepared. There's going to be the career fair. Whilst the program is going on in the morning, Lou will be handling the secondary schools for the Energy for Me is also the Energy for Me trainer. So for those who have not yet registered with me, or Fifi, or Adam, Derek, please raise your hand. Fifi, raise your hand. If you're interested to be trained to be a trainer for Energy for Me, please see any of us. We'll put your name down. And that event will happen tomorrow as well. So two events, one for secondary schools and one for experts like you or the YPs. At the same time, in the evening, I'm going to communicate to you. We're going to have a tree planting exercise. So for those who want to volunteer to go with us to plant trees, I believe most of you are happy to see the green pasture that you see here on campus. We want to plant some trees here for University of Ghana, for even accommodating us for 3 days, or let me say 4 days, if not 5. And for that one as well, if you want to volunteer, feel free to see me or Nick. Is Nick here? Yes, or Nick on my far left. All right, we want about 10 people for that. There's also going to be the dinner. So the dinner, because of the number, we are actually inviting those we are hosting here on campus and those who came from abroad, from different countries. And our dignitaries will also be joining us right here tomorrow 6 to 8. I'm just announcing it. He will announce it again tomorrow, but I'm just prompting you for what is going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow seems very packed, so come prepared. Thank you.
Please, you can go for lunch. Petro Bowl, faculty advisors, please, meeting in front. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been gone, it's an empty home. Come on back where you really belong. You are always welcome home, welcome home. You've been kept down for much too long. Stand up, please, and say I am free. Don't forget